Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Halflet, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week we read Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Demigod Files. And this was a bunch of brief stories, but that's okay because I like short stories. This was actually a fun little read this week for the second time.
We didn't really read it this week. We read it last week and talked about it last week, and then there was something with an SD card.
There was technical problems.
Something happened. So here we are again to talk about the same thing. Maybe we'll make the same jokes. Maybe they'll be different. We'll never know because Zach's audio is lost to the sands of time.
So this week we did read the Demigod Files, and I really did enjoy all these short stories, but how we're going to talk about this, because this would be like a train wreck if we broke everything down piece by piece and had like a 5-hour show, which neither of us can do today.
Yeah, well, because we normally do chapter by chapter, and these are like, it's interesting because they're short stories, so they sort of feel like just very long chapters in some ways, but we wouldn't be able to really parse them that much.
I was actually having kind of a problem with this with my brain, how it naturally like works with chapters, because I'm so used to Percy Jackson chapters. Maybe 10 pages, might be 20 at most, and here it's just like, oh my god, okay. It keeps going. It's like the frickin' Energizer Bunny. It just keeps going and going and going, and I'm sure like only 4 people will realize that joke, because that is old.
The Energizer Bunny? I mean, I remember that. They sometimes bring the Energizer Bunny back. Is that like in Christmas ads sometimes? No, I don't even remember. But regardless.
No, the Christmas ads that they always have now are Star Wars themed, because they had the one like the little girl as the R2-D2, and they put batteries in it for the sickly kid.
Oh, okay. I kind of remember that. I feel like we should just have a random episode that has nothing to do with anything about books and just talk about our favorite commercials or something.
Oh, you mean my favorite's the Campbell Soup one where it comes back to you?
It rolls to you?
It rolls
I've
back
seen that
to you.
one.
It's like a serial killer. It's like a horror movie.
Okay, let's not get sidetracked by commercials. That could be a Patreon episode or something. But this is an interesting book because it's short stories, as we've mentioned. We're not really used to this format for Percy Jackson. Normally their chapters are incredibly short, which is great for us because then we could really like delve into each one every week. So we're going to be a little bit more general, I guess, with the sort of plot points, or else we'll kind of never finish this episode.
I think what we'll do is we'll summarize what happens and talk about what we liked and what we hated about it. But it's not going to be like the intellectual breakdown that we normally have. Like, what if we talk about this sentence in great detail? Yeah, like the close
read it. Yeah, I don't know if we could do that necessarily. I'll talk about a few points.
Yeah, and we'll talk about a few points, but because the way this book is kind of structured as well is that it isn't just a series of short stories. It's very Lemony Snicket-esque, where it's like a guide, like a survival guide for being a demigod.
Oh yeah, it's meta. Well, we talked about this when we first recorded about this. It's insanely Lemony Snicket to the point where I'm like trying to figure out if that was an intentional thing or if it's just like this coincidence where Rick Riordan was like pulling from the same sorts of inspirations that Daniel Handler was at the time. And I mean, when did this come out again? This came out
2009.
Yes, 2009. What year? I mean, the Unfortunate Events books came out much earlier than that, I guess. So
last one came out in 2007, 2008.
Yeah, so I guess it was like the end of that to some extent.
It's kind of hard because with Lemony Snicket and even with this, they're almost like pseudo-epistolates at times, where for people that don't know what an epistolate is, it's like a journal format of something.
So like letters back and forth to people is like an epistolary novel, right? So that's like, it's not just someone narrating a story. They're like describing it sort of, which I mean, that's not actually what these short stories are structured like, but there's an introductory letter and then there are some interesting interviews with characters, which is another kind of weird addition to this.
We'll get into the interviews separately because that warrants its own discussion, but let's just talk about the letter and the tone. I like that Rick Riordan puts himself in as the senior scribe, and I think it's really funny and interesting.
This is very similar to the Lemony Snicket idea of being like, okay, so I'm not just the author of these books, I'm also a fictionalized version of myself within the universe of these books, which is even weirder, actually, that Rick Riordan does this, because he's not a character. He's not using a pseudonym like Lemony Snicket. He's using his real name. So he's kind of like implying that not only is Camp Half-Blood real, but he is a part of Camp Half-Blood and is like assigned as their scribe. It's this very like meta understanding of like how this works. And then you kind of get into like, oh, is this canon? Is he like canonically saying like, oh, Rick Riordan is a character in these books, therefore do they ever see him? Like it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but also I'm like, does he actually want to write himself into these stories?
Or do you want like the Stan Lee cameo approach where he sees Percy Jackson and like he just comes up to him? I guess one person can make a difference. Well, see ya.
Yeah. It's like, it's so meta too, because he literally is the scribe for Camp Half-Blood because he's writing these stories. So he's not wrong, really, even if he's not literally in the fictional universe.
Well, I think what makes Lemony Snicket like a brilliant approach to it is at first you don't realize he's a character in the story, but
right,
the more
and then
you
later
read the
you
book,
realize.
Yeah, that he is, and that he may or may not be the taxi driver in the penultimate peril.
Yeah, I mean, Lemony Snicket's different, though, because of the way that it's narrated already sets him up as a being who exists in a world where the events of the books are real, which is what Rick Riordan is doing here, but he doesn't always do that, because normally it's from Percy's perspective.
Well, here's the thing when it comes to Lemony Snicket is that the way that Series of Unfortunate Events is set up, it's almost like, I'm about to say like NCIS, where it's like almost like a report. It's like you have to come to your own conclusions. He's providing the facts. He's giving details that would normally be applied like in Percy Jackson. You get it from both Rick Riordan's point of view, but also Percy's, which I don't believe Percy actually wrote his book. I think he just gave it to Rick Riordan. If Rick Riordan's a character, yeah, he had it ghostwritten because...
So that's why you don't know about him. That's a fun fan theory, actually, to think about it. Like, oh, you've never heard of Rick Riordan, the scribe of Camp Half-Blood, because he's a ghostwriter and Percy doesn't want people to know. Because that kind of would almost make sense.
But it actually kind of makes more sense if you think about it, because a kid with ADHD and dyslexia might not be the best writer in catching his writing mistakes.
Doesn't want to write a novel about his whole life. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, actually. Though it's interesting because, like, Rick Riordan presents himself as, like, senior scribe, blah, 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 like, is sort of structuring himself as a character in this, as the person who's telling the story. But the stories, the short stories in this book, are still told in the way that all of the Percy Jackson books are told, which is from the perspective of Percy Jackson in the past tense. So he's telling a story of something that has already happened, basically.
Yes. And it's funny to think about how, like, Rick Riordan probably goes to the camp. Like, I just always think of things, like, in canon. And he's, like, almost like Steve Buscemi. What's up, my dudes?
Wait, why does he sound like Seuss from Gravity Falls?
Oh, hey, dudes. No, but, you know, it's like the Steve Buscemi thing in 30 Rock where he dresses up. What's up, my fellow youth?
Yeah. Hello, my fellow campers.
Yes.
Yeah, him trying to blend in is not exactly. That's also interesting when you think about how, in some ways, Chiron is kind of his self-insert already.
See, wouldn't that would have been better if it was like a Chiron type of thing? Though I like that it's Rick Riordan. I think if it was someone like a Grover, actually like a Seeker, trying to explain these things, or it's Percy Jackson himself that has written the stuff. But then it wouldn't make sense because you couldn't have had the interview things because Percy Jackson interviewing himself would have like a minor bias.
Right. Maybe Chiron. That might be interesting because it's sort of weird to think about Rick Riordan as his own discrete character. We're probably reading too much into this. I think this is just sort of like a fun marketing thing.
Well, it's a fun marketing thing.
But if you're like imagining him as a character, that sort of conflicts with the fact that there's already Chiron who like isn't exactly Rick Riordan, but fits as him in a lot of ways. Like he's a teacher figure. When you first meet him, you think that he's a teacher. You know what I'm saying? Like he has a mentor sort of role. He knows a lot about mythology. I don't necessarily think he's supposed to be exactly Rick Riordan, but, you know.
I think I just had like a minor stroke and just realized something. I'm looking at the book right now, and how genius and stupid this is that he's technically the senior scribe, and goes back to my theory that Rick Riordan wrote the book. Technically, both Percy Jackson and Rick Riordan's name is on the book, so you don't know who actually wrote the book. It would make sense to have something like that.
Oh.
Though it reminds me a lot of like how the theory that Rita Seeker and Harry Potter is just J.K. Rowling, though they're pretty much the same person in universe.
Yeah, what an unflattering portrayal of yourself that she accidentally put in her books. But that's its own complicated thing.
Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about the way that the letter is written before we move on, which is, I mean, it's just like so straight up Lemony Snicket that I have to believe that that was what inspired it, because it's not just the whole meta thing like we were talking about, which has been done in plenty of other books, I'm sure, but it specifically has this like apologetic tone warning you not to read this.
And the way the font is...
I mean, that is 100% unfortunate events. Like, yeah, the font is like that typewriter, like Courier New font. There's like his signature and then Rick Riordan, Senior Scribe, Camp Half-Blood. Like, everything about the structure of it feels very reminiscent of Lemony Snicket. It's weird.
The funny thing about this book as well is you have the digital copy, right?
Yeah.
So the actual physical copy, which I want to tell how old this book is for me. I bought it at Borders.
At Borders.
I got it for $12.95. But the book has the same type of how the pages are perforated, like a series of unfortunate events book. It feels like one. And I'm going to give you some ASMR. You get that like book smell.
Yeah, like that sort of like the uneven texture of the pages. I think that's probably intentional too, because the way, like the whole conceit of this book isn't like the normal Percy Jackson books too. It's supposed to sort of be, I don't exactly know, not exactly like a survival guide. Well, let me just like actually read the letter, and that might clarify like what they're trying to get across with this book. Dear young demigod, if you are reading this book, I can only apologize. Your life is about to get much more dangerous. By now you have probably realized that you are not mortal. This book is meant to serve as an inside look at the world of demigods that no regular human child would be allowed to see. As senior scribe of Camp Half-Blood, I hope the top secret information within will give you some tips and insights that may keep you alive in your training. So it's sort of like, I guess, a guidebook given to new campers, I guess, or like new demigods. Everything about this letter is very Lemony Snicket. The way it's phrased, the way it's sort of warning people, it's the way it's like written as like a sort of correspondence to someone who exists within this world, right? Like the letters from Lemony Snicket are written to his editor. The letter here is written to a young demigod. They're sort of like this conceit that you're not just a regular reader. You're a part of the story in some way.
Especially how they has the thing like in Lemony Snicket where it's like put this book down and pretend, feign ignorance at times. It's easier to do it that way. It's like instead of like in Series of Unfortunate Events, is put this book down if you want to be happy.
Yeah, it says you probably realize you're not mortal. This book is meant to serve as an inside look at the world of demigods that no regular human child would be allowed to see. So it's sort of saying, if you are a regular human child, then you wouldn't be reading this. You wouldn't be able to find it, which I mean is also sort of like, I think, a very popular structure for children's books as far as like marketing is concerned. Like the idea that you are not just a reader, but you are a character in this story in some way. One day you too will get your Hogwarts letter. Like this idea that you exist within the magical universe that we're talking about.
That is a good way to think about it, B, and I think that's really good infotainment, but also I have to think of it this way as you're having like the kids reading this are being like deterred. Please don't read this. But what do kids do if you tell them to do something they're not supposed to do?
They want to, yeah, it's also reverse psychology for sure, which is like definitely a thing that's like very alluring to kids. That whole idea of being like, oh, well, go away. This is too scary. This is too depressing. This is too whatever. And of course, some kids might be too afraid, but a lot of kids would be like, oh, I'm going to be contrarian and actually read this because you're saying it's like the secret stuff that, no mortal would read.
I'm just imagining like you pick up the book for Series of Unfortunate Events, put this book down if you want to be happy, and just put the book down and just walk away.
I'm sure there are kids who are like that. That's the thing. I mean, it really depends on your emo levels, I think.
Your emo levels, you have like a graph of like from like Invader Zim to a sliding. Well, actually, it'd be like a sliding scale between Nightmare Before Christmas and My Chemical Romance.
They're the same scale. They're the same level.
Are they the same level?
Yeah, I think so. Those are like the same people.
Not the
people
same.
who wore like sweatbands with Jack Skellington's face are the same people who wore like My Chemical Romance shirts, because I was both those people.
Were you one of those people that had the I Love Boobies
oh God,
bands?
No. I was never that person. That's a different person. In my school, jocks had that.
Okay. Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
every jock had that for reasons, because it said boobies on it.
Because they're like, haha, isn't that fun? Yeah, no, like more of like the quote unquote preppy people or whatever were into that kind of thing, I think. Well, a lot of people were. It was kind of a weird trend. God, was middle school and high school the most weird freaking like 8 years of our lives? Just what an odd microcosm.
Well, I think it's funny because I think about stuff like I remember like in middle school being so cool because I had a Gur sweatshirt that I would wear, like a little hoodie. Oh God, I'm just remembering all this terrible stuff.
Yeah,
I was just talking to my mom about like I used to go to PE when you had to put on your PE clothes with army combat boots, and I looked like such a champion.
Wow.
I'm no wonder I didn't beat myself up and shove myself in a locker.
Yeah, I remember that my gym clothes for middle school featured some sweatpants that I'm pretty sure I got at Kohl's and a t-shirt that I got from Hot Topic that was of Pinky and the Brain.
Yeah, that seems like something you would wear.
Yeah.
But now it would be something like Gravity Falls or Over the Garden Wall.
Yeah, probably. Same difference though, when you think about it.
When you come down and think of it, times have changed, but not really. But I think we should get into the interviews first before we get into the real meat of the stories.
Okay, you want to do that first?
Yeah. I think when it comes to these interviews, it's almost like Rick Riordan, like, oh man, I need to write some more pages. I'll make some fun interviews with questions that don't quite add any depth to it, but they're still fun in many, many fun ways.
So this sort of feeds into the whole quote unquote like fun concept of this book, that it's not just like a short story collection, because again, it's like a guidebook. That's why it's structured the way that it is. That's why, like you said, like the physical copy, it feels like a document and less like a book. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's trying to create this whole lore, and the interviews, I think, add to that. It's like this extra material of like, we're talking directly to the campers to give you information. And I don't know, the interviews are fun. I think they're really hilarious, a lot of them, but they're also like so incredibly on the nose, if that makes sense.
Well, that's because Rick Riordan picked the most easy questions. I have a feeling that he wrote these after the fact of doing all these short stories, because they probably asked him, hey, could you fill some more pages in for the book? It's too short. Because if you have the 3 short stories, you kind of need something to hold them all together, or it's just a collection of 3 short stories, which before this, you probably sell as like an ebook, like what J.K. Rowling does with her short stories now.
This book came out, I think it was February 2009, and the last Olympian came out in
the spring.
What was it? Like spring. It was like April or something. April 2009. May, maybe.
I remember that. I remember getting The Last Olympian. There's actually been twice that I've ever cried for a book, and basically skipping school. Actually, there's 3 times. First was to see Spider-Man 3.
Oh my God.
Yes, this is something.
Great disappointment on your part, it must have been.
Yes, and then the other time was for The End, Series of Unfortunate Events.
Okay, fair.
And then The Last Olympian.
Yeah, that completely tracks.
As an early teenager, yeah, it tracks.
So who do you think is supposed to be doing these interviews? Rick Riordan?
Well, yes, because he seems like the person that would have to do it, because you can't have Percy Jackson interviewing himself.
Yeah. So he's the senior scribe. Really weird. It's weird to imagine Rick Riordan as this other character in Camp Half-Blood, like interviewing these characters. There's so many questions about like what counts as canon. Like, is this just like a fun thought experiment of like, oh, how would these characters react to these questions? Or is Rick Riordan saying, yep, I literally interviewed them. That's a part of the story. It's interesting when it comes to like these more like gimmicky concepts for books.
So when it comes to the stuff, what you have to always step back and question is the author writing it? Yes. Does that warrant canon? Yes and no, because you can have things like, this is a text, this is specifically made for Percy Jackson, and it's published, it's actually like a book, like you can actually hear it. This would be, I would consider canon. It's weird because you talk about things like, in Star Wars, there's old canon considered called Legends, which was before Disney bought Star Wars, and once they bought it, they got rid of everything. So any book that after Disney bought Star Wars is now technically canon. Or you have the approach of like J.K. Rowling, where she says things after the fact. Does that count as canon?
Yeah, and they're not even written down. Yeah, like, oh, if you tweet something, is that canon? There's a lot of questions when it comes to that, because that's also kind of marketing too, right? When you tweet out something and say, this character, after the fact, even though I didn't make it explicit, is queer or is a person of color or whatever, does that all of a sudden become a part of the book just because you say it?
Well, that's J.K. Rowling putting her foot in her mouth.
Yeah, that's the J.K. Rowling thing. But with this, it's sort of like, it's not exactly the same, but it is like marketing, because it's not trying to like write a new story. Like, obviously the short stories I think are canon because they're in the same structure as the books. But these like interviews are like imply a lot of other stuff that isn't just written down.
So here's the rub. You can't substitute one thing for another. So if one thing's canon in the book, everything technically has to be canon in the book.
Yeah, everything has to be. But then the implications are so weird. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, because then you get to things like, we'll get into it with like the interviews, because some of them are easy. Like you get ones like from the Stoll brothers, but then you get into like Annabeth, and she pretty much says that Percy Jackson is cute and things.
Yeah, which, I mean, I guess is subtext. All of the things that
No,
they
it's
say
plain
in
text
these
here.
Well, I'm saying, yes, it's text here, but I'm saying it's subtext in the rest of the books where all of the other characters don't exactly have as much of a chance to really express their feelings, like the way that it's written and the fact that it's from Percy's perspective. And as we will mention from Annabeth's letter, he's maybe not the most perceptive guy. It's kind of like the Harry Potter syndrome of like, if you make your protagonist, who's the narrator, not that perceptive, sometimes what ends up being the text is like not everything that's happening. Do you know what I mean? So it's a more of like a transparent understanding of the characters by having these interviews, because it's not Percy remembering in retrospect, like, oh wait, how did Annabeth feel? And I didn't really get what was going on, and I don't understand girls because I'm like a teenage boy who like is living in my own dumb world. Like, that's kind of interesting in a way, because if Rick Riordan's interviewing, then he like has a better perspective. Like, if maybe not him, but whatever, some outside person is interviewing, then it's like it's less clouded by Percy's own stuff.
Yes, and we're going back to like the thing between canon and not canon. I always like to use the case of, because I'm Jewish, that the New Testament is just the extended biblical universe to us. And that's like, you can have like either or, but it's things that you can infer and things that you can apply. And that when it comes to this, I feel like because it's interviews, it's not meant, because obviously the joke is that Rick Riordan is going to edit any of these interviews, is that you get things that are caught up. Like for us, like when we podcast, like, yes, we make mistakes, but then like I edit them out. Like sometimes you go, but you know, and we cut that out. But here the joke is that these are like unedited. They're like free flowing, and they're like almost, it's an interesting thought experiment from Rick Riordan's point of view. Like, I'm sure he sat down one day, okay, I'm going to write it in the perspective of Annabeth. I'll write in the perspective of Clarice and Percy, and it's fun. But the problem, though, is when you get to the actual stories, they don't reflect this. Then again, some of them they do, some of them they don't, because there's parts with Annabeth and Percy, there's things with Clarice and Percy, and then you have Clarice, Thalia, and Nico is another thing, and things get moved on. But the problem, though, is when you're looking at the extended universe, or is this canon or not, is you always have to think about, how does this apply back to the core series? If it does, if not, is it canon? Because the weird thing, though, is like we read these and you can have the personification or like the idea of, okay, so now we have these new motivations. Do they still apply to the actual main series, or is this its own separate universe?
I think it applies to the main series. I think the interviews are just a little bit more interesting because they feel just like very much like a gimmick of like, here's like this fun other way of getting to interact with these characters, that sometimes it feels like, especially like the way that they're structured and how like even like the way that the characters respond, they're such like parodies of themselves that it does feel sort of like just a joke, and less like, oh, this is a literal thing where they were interviewed and these are things that they said. But I guess that it has to be. It has to be canon.
Well, the only way for this to actually work properly is if back in the day, if we got into our time machine, if Rick Riordan was like, hey guys, why don't you submit some questions, and Annabeth, Percy, Clarice, the Stoll brothers, and all your favorites will answer the questions in my next book. That's the only way to try and chew it. Otherwise, it's Percy Jackson and Clarice and stuff being themselves, because Rick Riordan has to make questions that don't sway from like, they're not going to ask straight up, so Percy, do you like Annabeth? And that wouldn't be a question, because then you have a piece of lore that may or may not need to be answered in the last book.
Yeah, that maybe that's too straightforward. It's interesting though because also the questions that are asked of each camper aren't the same. They're tailored based on the characters.
Well, that's kind of the idea of the easy thinking. Like Rick Riordan was patting himself on the back a little bit because they're not interviews. This is not how you structure an interview. We've done interviews before. I've taken plenty of classes on interviews. Like you're supposed to pick questions that are very either neutral or something that you want to get a specific point across. Here, there's catered for that specific individual. You can have that.
Well, yeah, it's getting the specific point across. They remind me a little bit of like leading questions in a tabloid or something. Like that's kind of the way that they're phrased, especially the ones directed at Clarice, definitely Annabeth, and definitely Percy, where they're just sort of like they're trying to like eke out their own like weird teenage nerdiness, where it's just like, you know, asking, I don't know.
This is where it would have worked if Rick Riordan actually had like a Moxie Malahan type of demigod that was actually compiling this book. And that's like the scoop that she wants to get is these specific questions. But because it's Rick Riordan as an adult man asking things about this and they're getting responses.
Doesn't it feel very fan servicey in some ways?
Yes. Well, I've said before, even in our first episode, that a lot of his short stories and a lot of these supplemental material books are very fan fiction-y at times like this. This is what I was trying to get across with that.
Yeah, the interviews especially feel so fan fiction-y. Just like, it feels like somebody is like, oh, how would Annabeth react in this scenario? Like, it's so specific to her, like very, very on the nose, like exactly the kind of like, oh, well, she's sort of huffy and she likes Percy but doesn't want people to know it, but she also wants him to notice. And like all of these things that are sort of subtext are made really, really obvious in the interview with her.
Yes, and there'd be things like if you interviewed Nico. So, Nico, what are your favorite bands? I like Dashboard Confessional, Dark Star, My Chemical Romance, Sleeping with Sirens, 30 Seconds to Mars. You know, the joke would be that he likes emo bands or like he likes death metal.
Yeah, I don't even know if Rick Riordan would make a joke like that. Hasn't he mentioned actual musicians? One time he mentioned Hillary Duff. Remember that?
That was in the very first book. Yeah. And it's crazy because Hillary Duff is making a comeback. They're doing a Lizzie McGuire TV show. Then one of my favorite pictures of her is she's holding tacos, and she had gone target practicing with her Glock, so she's Glock and tacos.
Wait, actually Hillary Duff?
My Glockos. Yes, it was actually Hillary Duff.
Wow, that's a powerful image. Hold on, wait, I want to Google that. I just want to look at it and see. Oh my god, there it is, huh? There's so much going on there.
Yeah, Rick Riordan is he does references like that. There's a lot of times where they talk about like McDonald's. Actually, in this, they don't talk about McDonald's. It's actually funny in this book. But when it comes to it, Rick Riordan later on writes about things like the Wii. He talks about things that are like, you know, what kids would relate to. Stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting though. You really tread a dangerous line when you do that because you will sound very outdated the second that becomes not a thing anymore.
My favorite in Harry Potter is when Harry's talking to Sirius Black about the PlayStation 1.
That's not true, right?
No, that's true. It is something that happens. Yes.
No.
Yes, look it up. There's a part where they talk about the PlayStation 1 because Dudley wouldn't let him play it.
No, the game is just going to come up, though.
Yeah, no, it's in the text. There's a part, unless I'm having a stroke right now or the dementia is kicked in, that there's a part.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, no. He threw his PlayStation out a window.
Yeah, they talk about the PlayStation 1. It's pretty bad.
What? That's so hilarious.
But you can have things like that where you have like that tricky line where you have pop culture references. Like most kids today wouldn't understand who Hillary Duff is, except for us, that she had a music career, which is weird because it was such a small snippet of time.
Oh my god, I'm on the fandom wiki and this is hilarious. Dudley Dursley threw his PlayStation 1 out his window in the summer of 1994. Then behind the scenes, the PlayStation was not commercially released until December 1994 in Japan and September 1995 in Europe. However, prototypes were made available to game developers before December 1994, some of which ended up being sold to private consumers. It is possible that Vernon and Petunia Dursley, as indulgent parents, bought one of these prototypes for Dudley. Alternatively, the Harry Potter novels may take place in a universe in which the PlayStation was released earlier than in our own. Or
Wait.
Harry, due to his lack of interest in Muggle technology, might have confused the PlayStation with a similar console.
Everybody, when that you're laughing, this is an actual thing that nerds do, where they complain about timelines and actually look at the hard facts.
It's like, wait, no, the PlayStation wasn't out yet. Are you
Oh
serious?
my god, we gotta move on before we talk about even dumber things. We talked about Hilary Duff with like Lock and Tacos and the PlayStation and Harry Potter not being commercially available.
Yeah, the interviews are interesting. Interestingly, there isn't any like really time-specific pop culture stuff that you'd think that they would mention something, especially because you're interviewing teenagers. But instead, it's just like a lot of like emotional stuff, especially like Annabeth. There's a lot of very betraying answers she had. Well, I guess Clarice too. Like we sort of see through her persona in this interview.
Well, we realize that at this point in time, she's not going to ever fight Percy Jackson. The idea is that, oh, I'm just buying my time, waiting for the right moment, but that's just her way of saying I'm never going to fight him.
Yeah, because it says, did you ever get revenge on Percy for soaking you with toilet water? And he said, oh, that little punk has been bragging again, huh? Don't believe him. He exaggerated that whole thing. Believe me, revenge is coming. One of these days, he's going to be sorry. Why am I waiting? Just strategy, biding my time and waiting for the right moment to strike. I'm not scared, okay? Anybody says different, I'll rearrange their dental work. Like, such a classic Clarice line, her being defensive about, like, not being brave enough, her trying to, like, seem tough even though she probably doesn't even want to fight Percy to begin with. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, especially when it comes to Clarice, because there's actually a very Clarice-centric short story here. But also, I like how they are in character. That's the main thing I want to get across here is, yes, it might be overhyped or basically over stylized of their characters, but it does feel like an interview that kind of does work. And I do have to applaud Rick Riordan for doing that. It's not like you're getting like the juicy intel. Like she's like, oh, I love Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson's my best friend.
My best,
you're not
exactly.
Going to put that in the interview, right?
That's exactly the way she would react. I think it's just funny because it's like such a short interview. So the idea that immediately like you would break through the veneer of her persona. Do you know what I mean?
I just imagine like she's just sitting in like her recreation of the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones because that's what she would have.
Only it's made out of celestial bronze.
Well, yeah, no, it's an actual like Iron Throne. I guess it's the Celestial Throne at that point. She's just really into Game of Thrones. But you know, you're doing an interview like this, and there's just explosions and landmines all throughout the Ares cabin. Like there would be like jokes like that, but you don't get that across because this is such a short interview. I kind of wish this was its own separate book or something, where just interviews from Camp Half-Blood, where then you can like explore things like it's like Mindhunter, where you have the mic on, so then you hear things in the background. Like editor's note, there was explosions.
Yeah, like if it was longer, I guess. Yeah, that's what makes it feel so silly is like it's 4 questions, whatever. They ask Clarice 3 questions, and in that amount of time, there's like so much psychologically that you can see going on. Same thing with Annabeth and same thing with Percy. I'd say that the other ones seem a little bit less serious. Like Grover, a lot of it is kind of silly, you know, our tin can's really that tasty. The Stoll brothers, it's a lot about them like playing pranks and everything. Like that's just sort of for the novelty of talking about that stuff. But as for like the main more serious characters, there's definitely a lot going on.
They're just there to be fun, because then afterwards you get things like the map of Camp Half-Blood, which now we have a frickin' map, which I love.
So you can sort of conceptualize of where everything is. It's kind of helpful, actually.
It is a helpful map, but the problem, though, is it's also really bad, because it has like all these nice legends to it, but this whole place just looks like a disaster. You have everything like looks spread apart. Like there isn't like the key like, tells you the distance between everything. So for all we know, this could be like all of Long Island.
Yeah, that's true. There is no sort of frame of reference. For some reason, this map reminds me a lot of like the map of campus I had for my college.
Oh yeah, mine was
like
terrible.
Everything's real spread out and in the woods.
Well, that's because you lived at like Bard, where everyone was like hippies and they all foraged their berries and nuts.
No, yeah, I had like a 20-minute walk to class.
My college was on a mountain pretty much, so everything was just uphill, and all my classes were always uphill, so everything was never downhill for me. Womp. But B, do you want to get into some of the short stories now? Because I think we're primed and we're ready to get into some juicy short stories.
Yeah, I guess I just want to talk about a few like specific questions that people were asked. We mentioned Clarice. I kept referring to Annabeth, but just like a lot of it is very like betraying of how she feels about Percy. You know what I mean? Like what does she say? The last question is like so definitely like so fan servicey. It's ridiculous. You've been
It's
known to
on
call
the
Percy.
nose.
Yeah, it's really really on the nose. You've been known to call Percy seaweed brain from time to time. What's his most annoying quality? Well, I don't call him that because he's so bright, do I? I mean, he's not dumb. He's actually pretty intelligent, but he acts so dumb sometimes. I wonder if he does it just to annoy me. The guy has a lot going for him. He's courageous, he's got a sense of humor, he's good looking, but don't you dare tell him that. Tell him I said that. Where was I? Oh yeah, so he's got a lot going for him, but he's so obtuse. That's the word. I mean, he doesn't see really obvious stuff, like the way people feel, even when you're giving him hints and being totally blatant. What? No, I'm not talking about anyone or anything in particular. I'm just making a general statement. Why does everyone always think, forget it? Oh my god, this response was so, like, ridiculous.
I might actually have like a printing error in my book because like half of this thing was just bold and pretty much had giant blinky lights that said, "Oh my god, this is obvious." I'm not sure if you get that in a digital copy, but I noticed it very quickly.
With a big sign like from Beetlejuice or something that says Annabeth like
yes,
Percy.
exactly.
Yeah, this is like so on the nose. Like maybe if it just ended at like he doesn't see really obvious stuff like the way people feel even when you're giving him hints, even when you're being totally blatant. But the what? No, I'm not talking about anyone or anyone in particular. Like that part gets to be a little bit silly to me.
I don't know if like Rick Riordan like listens to our podcast. I mean, it would be cool if he did. But
yeah.
If I would say one piece of advice from a person who's never written a book, but I read a lot, is that subtlety goes a long way. It's okay to infer things, but when you do things like this, yes, I guess it's a kid's book.
Yeah, it was like one sentence too ridiculous for me.
It goes from believable to pretty much, okay, now you're pandering.
Yeah, exactly. It felt like, see, it's obvious she likes him. It's like, you could have gotten that just from even when you're giving him hints, even when you're being totally blatant. Like, that alone would have been perfect, I think. I actually really liked that phrasing, because it's exactly why she's so frustrated with Percy, is he's oblivious.
See, but in the second story, we get a much better version of this interview, in The Bronze Dragon, where Percy Jackson and Annabeth go see fireworks together. There's nothing more romantic than fireworks, because nothing says I love you more than explosions 30 feet up in the air.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll get more into the Percy Annabeth dynamic, but I thought that was like a little bit on the nose. Same thing with the
on the nose. It was
thing.
up the nose.
Yeah, basically. But actually, Percy's interview isn't nearly as on the nose as Clarice or Annabeth. I don't think, because they don't really get into like emotional stuff between characters as much. I guess the thing about this gets back into the Lemony Snicket thing of like, oh no, you're a demigod, what a terrible thing, when they say any advice for kids who suspect they may be demigods too, and Percy says, pray you are wrong, seriously, this may sound fun to read about, but it is bad news. If you do think you're a demigod, find a satyr fast. You can usually spot them at any school. They laugh weird and they eat anything. They might walk funny because they're trying to hide their hooves, etc. You know.
This goes back to the very first chapter of The Lightning Thief, where I accidentally blew up my pre-algebra teacher. This is exactly what Percy Jackson says. Because that's where it goes from Lemony Snicket very quickly to becoming its own thing of like, if you're a demigod, you need to get out of here, just pretend you aren't one to make your life a whole lot easier. Whereas here, it's more of an interview question. I like that he's honest. But once again, there's some things about this interview that I really do enjoy. Like he talks about what's like, during the summer, during school, while you've been kicked out. He's like, oh yeah, the hardest part was always building up my reputation, making friends. Like there's a lot of things that are very Percy-esque.
Yeah, I actually really liked the Percy interview. It felt a little bit more like genuine and less fan servicey.
Yes, I think because here's the problem though. I don't understand, like I love Annabeth as a character, but the problem though is the way that Rick Riordan writes Annabeth now, she's kind of a dingus. In this term of like she's
flanderized is like the phrase I would use.
Okay.
She's like sort of an extreme version of herself sometimes. She gets like very exaggerated, like, oh, she's so jealous, she's so frustrated by Percy, she doesn't really like think before she says that, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a sort of like stereotype of what she is, how she, thinks she's always right, how she gets frustrated when people don't listen to her. Like, that's kind of what her characterization is. And then it's really taken to the extreme in certain elements in the books in general, but like the interview really is just like makes it so obvious.
But that's not to say that she isn't a great character. I think...
No, I think she's a great character. I just think they could tone it back just a little bit. Just tone it down a little teeny tiny bit.
I think I was using some poor choice of words, but I think that the joke is just turn it down just a little bit. I think tonally she's all over the place in this and in some of the chapters. But if you just turned it down just a little bit and added subtlety, I like subtlety in books. It works a lot better than having her be boy crazy at times or doing things because man.
So we really need to just get into these short stories, I think.
Yes, we do. So the first one, would you like to summarize it, B? Well, how would you summarize it in a sentence?
In a sentence? Wait, hold on. The first one is Percy Jackson, the Stolen Chariot. Oh, yeah, well, we talked about this. It's like Percy and Clarice...
The buddy cop show.
The buddy cop show featuring a stolen chariot, basically.
For some reason, Clarice is the one with the mustache and Percy Jackson is the nervous cop.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the new on the force.
Yeah, he's fresh on the force.
And she's like the one grabbing him, being like, get it together, man.
No, she's the one that's like Magnum PI. She's the one that's just driving the nice car and then she just shoots before asking questions.
She has a cigar for some reason.
No, B, that's just Clarice in real life now.
Yeah, her just being like, I'm getting too old for this. It's like, Clarice, you're a teenager.
3 days to retirement. She drinks warm coffee, black.
Yeah. Why does that fit so well?
Clarice is the type of girl that totally would rock a Hawaiian shirt all day, every day.
Probably.
Oh my God, I love this.
Yeah, this headcanon is really getting out of control. But anyway, this is kind of a pretty basic story that kind of... The focus at first is the stolen chariot, but it very quickly becomes a story about Percy and Clarice's fears, basically. So it's just an excuse to talk about that, I think.
I think each of these stories is almost like a conduit. Like the stories are here, but they're here for a main reason or a focal point. Yeah,
the premise is so that way we can get more interesting character stuff, I think. Which is kind of why I really like these stories, because they feel a little bit more character driven and less like fight scene driven. Like there's obviously some fight scenes and there's some like physical conflict and things like that, but there's also a lot of like internal psychology stuff going on.
When it comes to these short stories, B, this is where it kind of verges from fan fiction-y, but the good thing about it makes a short story a good thing is you can tell a good story in a very short amount of time. I guess, yes, it's just short story. I think Ray Bradbury did some of the best. You can have short stories that last 30, 40 pages, or you can have one that lasts 3 or 4. But here, they do work. They actually pick every tone of Percy Jackson almost perfectly, where you have the fight stuff, you have the character stuff, you have the infotainment, but most importantly, the thing that you have is the characters that are trying to be themselves.
Yeah, you have the fun mythology stuff too, because we learn about we learn about her brothers, Phobos and Deimos, right? That's so they're fear and terror.
Or I like to call them shock and awe.
Yeah.
But you get Phobos, who that's where we get the term phobia from. That's why he's so high and mighty, is because every phobia is named after him in one way, shape, or form. The one thing I don't like about this is that how every story is kind of put together. It's very fan fiction-y. Percy Jackson was at school and Clarice came to town.
Yeah, the way it's framed might feel a little silly. Is that what you're saying?
The introduction, the very beginning of these stories is very, very fan fiction-y, where he's trying to get in very quickly. So he'll put him in a situation where it's like, wait, you were hunting this? I was hunting this. Very fan fiction-y. Well, I guess we should hunt this together.
Yeah, like things fall together very quickly. Yeah, I see what you're saying. The fact that Percy like looks out at the window of his school and notices Clarice there, like, you know what I'm saying? The fact that like, what are the odds of that happening? The kind of premise of it is a little bit silly. Then again, that's kind of how a lot of Percy Jackson books start, though, is him being at school and then him noticing something going on and then he has to go off and deal with it. So it's not that different.
Most of the time it's because Percy Jackson doesn't have a choice because things keep blowing up in front of him.
Yeah, he keeps exploding schools like on a regular basis. So I get it. It's funny because that's kind of what makes it feel fanfictiony though, because it is so Percy Jackson that he'd be sitting in school and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, I gotta deal with this.
Yeah, it's funny, and also they're talking about A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens.
Yeah, so again, heavy-handed.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Well, that's like it's such a Rick Riordan thing to do, that whenever he mentions Percy learning about anything in like a school setting, it's never unintentional.
It's not subtle.
Do you know what I mean? It's always a specific relation to what's happening.
It's a specific
you know
lesson,
what I mean?
Which is like A Tale of Two Cities is people that are diametrically opposed to each other that have to come together.
Well, it's also about war, sort of, and about conflict, and then obviously Ares, god of war, Clarice has this conflict, and like then she has to face her fear. Like, there's a lot of layers to this.
I'm surprised it wasn't something like War and Punishment or something really dumb.
Yeah,
like
we're gonna read like The Art of War.
The Art of, I was about to say that. Well, that's Clarice's favorite book. My dad wrote it when he was in China.
Yeah. When he was in China. That's funny.
Yeah, it'd be fun. But I do like the story a lot because I love it when you have characters that they have different ideologies. They're two different extremes that have to be forced to be put together and work as a team. This is where Clarice and Percy has always been one of my favorite lineups, even in Sea of Monsters, because she is so dense and hot-headed, while Percy Jackson, he's not dumb, but he does his best thinking when he's not thinking, but also he's calm and collected at times and can come up with solutions that Clarice would rather be like, I'm gonna shoot it with an RPG.
Yeah. No, she's like, she comes on strong as one Sister Patterson from Flavor of Love would say.
That's because you watched Flavor of Love, and this is the funniest thing.
It's very hilarious. It's an interesting anthropological view. And as she says, or no, actually that's not what she says. That's what New York Tiffany Pollard says about her mom, Sister Patterson. She says she comes on strong, she comes on heavy, and she remains there. That's kind of, but that's Clarice for you. She just like, she wants to win. She's so competitive. And we kind of talk a little bit about that in this chapter about why she's so competitive. Obviously, the innate nature of a child of Ares is going to be competitive, going to be obsessed with sort of war strategy, but it's something beyond that, obviously, because she wants to impress her dad separately from that.
Yes, and going on this little bit is that the reason why Percy Jackson goes on her quest is because she had taken her dad's war chariot out for a ride, and it got stolen, and she needs to bring it to a temple, which is funny because it's the USS Indianapolis, which is hilarious in my eyes. Of course, it's a warship, would be her dad's shrine and temple.
Yeah, of course it's... so I have to bring the chariot to a temple on the Intrepid.
The Intrepid, I'm sorry. It wasn't
the Intrepid, yeah, sorry. Same idea though. It's an aircraft carrier, so it's like it's the obvious thing of like everything related to war is like Ares turf, basically. The typical urban fantasy thing that he does.
I'm surprised that his temple wasn't built on like Hiroshima or like Trinity. Actually, it would be true. Actually,
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if but that's kind of like probably canon to some extent. Like from what I understand, because of like the way that the Percy Jackson universe works. The seat of power of like Western civilization, that's where all of like the demigods and the sort of mythology goes. So therefore, anything that has to do with war that's in America is like under the domain of Ares.
I can totally see that Ares has a throne in the center where they tested the atomic bomb in Alamogordo in Trinity. He just has like a giant throne of melted glass.
It's practically canon because that's like what's implied.
Oh, no, I'm sure he was, like, there flying the plane.
Yeah, exactly.
No, he was probably flying the plane, or you know what? Because of Rick Riordan's, how he does things, the person that dropped the bomb was a son of Ares. That's probably canon.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is sort of canon. That's the way that Rick Riordan writes to some extent. It's like, oh, well, everything that ever had to do with war has to do with Ares. Everything that ever had to do with water had to do with Poseidon. Do you know what I mean? Like, Historical revisionism, we've talked about this. I have like mixed feelings about it, but it's like generally canon is an interesting thing for him because he's like, well, remember every historical event? I can contextualize that within like this mythology that I've created.
It's funny because when you get to the story, I think if you want to look at the core aspect of the story about the Chariot and Clarice is that Clarice is a woman and that Ares is like thinks that all women are weak almost, and you have like this weird almost misogyny.
The misogyny of that. Yeah.
Obviously misogyny with this because you look at the Sea of Monsters and she's working twice as hard compared to her brothers, whereas you see here with her two brothers and they're a bunch of ding-dongs and they get scared really easily, but Clarice is the one that has to work extra hard to get the Chariot to the Intrepid. And it's really great to see this because she has to work as a team rather than herself. Because when she works by herself, she almost got eaten by Polyphemus. That's what ends up happening. She needs people, and I think that's what I really enjoy about her is that she's very strong, but also when you get to her fears and all that stuff, she's the completely broken inside.
She gets a little distracted, I think. It's interesting. Well, you said that she took Ares' chariot out for a joyride, which is how Percy, like, contextualizes it. But that's not what happened. She apparently was tasked with taking it out as a test and supposed to bring it back at sunset, but your brothers carjacked you is what Percy says. So yeah, and then it's interesting the way she frames it too, because she doesn't say, oh, they stole it, or like she seems panicked, but she says they pranked me, which is complicated because like that's a pretty mean, cruel prank to play on someone.
Oh, so obviously Ashton Kutcher is a son of Ares. Got it.
Yeah, honestly.
You got punked.
Yeah, I feel like her immortal brothers have a real mean YouTuber understanding of what a prank is, which is do something mean and then be like, that was a joke, that's not what a prank is. Dude,
it was just a prank. It was just a prank, dude. Chill out, man. Yeah, just a prank.
Out. I took the war chariot from our God of War dad, and he's gonna murder you.
When it comes to like prank YouTubers, like some of my favorite are like when they do things like the silly salmon, or they do dumb things that don't hurt people.
Yeah, so that's not really what's happening here. It's kind of creepy because like they're her siblings sort of, but they're like her evil immortal siblings.
Yeah, but they're also doofuses that once you figure out that they're afraid of everything, that's their one weakness. Whereas here we actually have a fun thing. Well, not say fun, but interesting, I guess that's the best word to use, is where we see both Percy Jackson's fear and Clarice's true fear. And we'll get into it. Let's get into Percy's first, because Clarice is very easy, because we've talked about it at great length many, many moons ago.
Yeah, so it's her dad, obviously. Well, not specifically her dad. It's complicated. It's like she wants to be validated by her dad. She wants her dad's approval.
Yes. Whereas Percy Jackson is the most thing he's afraid of is what he sees is fire and blood. He sees the camp on fire. He sees that his friends are dead almost. And that they're like, you should make the choice. You need to make the choice, which is his greatest fear is choosing what's going to happen to Olympus and making a choice no matter what it is. It's a choice. Will it save the world? Will it just doom the world? And that's terrifying for a kid.
I guess their fears are kind of obvious, but it is interesting that we get to like explicitly talk about them instead of it just being implied.
Well, I think the problem, though, is when it comes to Percy's fear, you can take it as two ways. It's either he has to make a choice or that he's afraid that he's going to let down his friends and they're all going to die because of him.
Yeah. I mean, again, kind of obvious. If you're in the position of Percy, yeah, that's what you're going to be afraid of. I don't know. I find they have such like horrible, intense fears for children, which is so sad. Do you know what I mean?
B, there are far worse fears out there. Like, just imagine, like, for you to see a giant tree that just oozes, like, pollen, trying to, like, snatch you up with, like, weird pollen hands. Like, oh, no.
Listen, I'm allergic to cats, but I still hang out with cats, so I walk among the fire.
Oh, no, what happens is it's a gigantic cat whacking a giant tree filled with pollen.
Again, adorable. I'd just pop a Sudafed and deal with it.
But in this fear, you don't. Oh no, I'm out of Sudafed.
Okay, then I would just die probably. Guess I'll die.
I don't know what my fear is. B, what's my fear?
Wait, you're asking me what your fear is?
Yeah, what would my fear be? Because I told you what your fear is.
Probably another like bad Star Wars movie or something. I don't know. Your fear is like bad movies, but like not so bad that they're good. Just like boring.
Bad. No, I feel like it would be like me doing stand-up comedy and people just booing me. Oh no.
Yeah, I guess so.
How about that airplane food?
Oh, I guess maybe your worst fear is oh, I don't know. I actually genuinely you're normally so positive, so I'm trying to think of like something that you hate. I don't know. I literally can't think of anything.
It's something so dumb and mundane, like I don't want lemon in my water, please. When it comes down to it, I like how Percy Jackson conquers it because he owns up to his fear.
Yeah.
And that's what makes things flow. And the moral of the story is that it's okay to be afraid of things, but you need to accept that you are afraid of things, because if you let fear conquer you, fear will just dominate you in many different ways. And that's how he helps Clarice out, and they're able to get the chariot back, and Clarice and Percy do a Jesus move where they literally ride on water. Except Percy Jackson doesn't turn the whole ocean into wine. That's a Dionysus power move.
Yeah, no, he can't do that anymore, unfortunately.
No, I'm just waiting for that. Where just this cool parlor tricks like that. Oh man, you know what the greatest fear would be? Dionysus turning children into wine, because we're all 75% water.
Oh my god! Now you're 75% wine. I honestly really love this short story a lot. I think it's very sweet, like the dynamic that Percy and Clarice have. I really like the closing statement that they have, because so they admit to each other basically what their fears are. Well, I mean, they see it, and then they're sort of like, oh, are you going to mention that to other people? Because Clarice is sort of like neurotic about people knowing that she fears her father's disappointment, which, like, okay, Clarice, everybody knows. I don't know.
It's not a
how
secret.
Obvious
We just don't
you think it is, but I thought that was really sweet when, because she saw the vision of like his friends and that he was worried about disappointing everybody and having something horrible happen because of prophecy. Yeah. So I want to actually read that.
Yeah, it's very sweet. Go read it, please.
I wasn't sure Clarice had ever said thank you in her life. Don't mention it, I told her. I started to walk away, but she called out, Percy? Yeah. When you had that vision about your friends, you were one of them, I promised. Just don't tell anybody, okay? Or I'd have to kill you. A faint smile flickered across her face. See you later. See you. I headed off toward the subway. It had been a long day, and I was ready to go home. And that's the end.
I like when you have like stories like this, especially when we first meet to Clary. She's like a downright psychopath trying to murder Percy, and now they're friends. They're frenemies.
Yeah, what a weird left turn.
So moving on to the next one, it's Percy Jackson and the Bronze Dragon, and the best way I'd summarize this book is it's a giant science fiction 50s B movie with ancient mythology giant ants that eat people, and it's horrifying. And then a dragon appears.
What is the movie with giant ants again?
Them.
I definitely
don't even have to look that up. I just
them
know it.
when I was a kid, and it messed me up so much. Because they always say, if ants were like the size of people, that they would be really strong. That's also, to be fair, the fear that I had when I watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Giant ants are a really horrifying prospect to me. Giant bugs in general.
It's funny because it's a trope. You can see giant ants in a lot of things, like in Fallout. In Fallout 3, they shot fire at you. That was something that
I
they
don't
would
want
do.
that.
And they were like really giant. Like, oh man, like if I just saw a giant ant, I'd just be like, nope. Heart, give out, please. I don't even want to deal with this.
I'm creeped out by regular ants. So a big ant, get out of here. I don't want any of that. None of your ant business.
Now, here's the thing. If you could domesticate the poop out of an ant, would you want to have one as a pet, like an ant on a leash?
No,
yes.
I would absolutely not want an ant. They got scary feelers. I don't like it.
Their feelers are for feeling, B. They're good for hugs.
No, they should keep their feelings to themselves.
Okay, B, would you rather have a giant spider as a pet on a leash, or would you rather have a gigantic ant on a leash?
An ant. Yeah. First of all, spiders, they have more legs. Right there, that's enough. They're also hairy, and they have more eyes.
Ah, man.
Both are creepy, though.
I'm just imagining for some reason, like, I'm walking down the street with my giant pet spider, and it has like it's like Rosie has like a little bow on its side.
No, I hate it. Oh, I hate it so much.
But here we have, moving on a little bit, Percy Jackson and the gang play Capture the Flag. And everything goes wrong because they meet up with some giant ants, and Breckendorf gets stuck into a hole, and pretty much things go wrong.
Yeah, the mirror. How do you pronounce this? Mirmix? Mirmix?
Chex Mix? Miramux?
Chex Mix. They meet up with the giant Chex Mix, the holiday classic.
I'm just imagining like they have like the good ones, or like the pieces of chocolate, like the trail mix ones, and then the Chex Mix ones are the really gross ones, like the really salty crackers.
Well, now I'm just imagining the ants have legs made out of pretzel sticks, and then that kind of makes me feel a little bit better.
Oh man, that's horrifying. Because when they get old, like how they die is because they get like really stale. They just stop moving.
They get really stale. Mm-hmm. All their salt falls off.
This sounds depressing. You're gonna make this into a Pixar movie? Coming next, Pretzel Spiders.
Honestly, Pixar could make a movie about a bunch of different pieces of Chex Mix and how they live inside the bag, and it would probably make me cry.
What if Chex Mix had feelings?
Yeah. That's every one of their board meetings. Okay, but what if alarm clocks had feelings? Actually, that is already a movie, and it's called The Brave Little Toast.
No, that's basically like, what if feelings had feelings? You're onto something there, Bob.
That's Inside Out.
Yeah, so with the capture the flag, Beckendorf gets captured. They end up resurrecting an old ancient automaton dragon, and I have to say, I'm going to go on the record, I think dragons are cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I actually, out of all the short stories, I didn't like this one as much because it's more action heavy. And you really don't get character stuff until you have some of them getting and then some in the end, and it's mostly just about like Percy and Annabeth being dumb towards each other.
Well, no, out of all these, this is my least favorite because I think the message that it's supposed to get across is really like bonks you over the head. B, bonk. Everyone likes each other. Bonk.
Oh, yeah. Well, right, because it's also about Beckendorf, too. Like, they're having, like, this weird conversation about how to talk to girls in the beginning.
Even Beckendorf tells Percy, dude, she's totally into you. And Percy's like, nah, she's not. I mean, she kissed me this summer, but that doesn't mean anything. That's like kissing your sister or something.
On the one hand, Annabeth's interview totally on the nose. On the other hand, she's very right. Sorry to this man, but he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know a single feeling of other people.
Like, if we want to be like true right now, listeners, that is, if a girl kissed me, totally be like, I have a crush on you. Like, oh my God, you kissed me at my moment of need.
Yeah, I actually want to read the conversation that he has with Beckendorf, which is,
yes, please.
Beckendorf walked up with his helmet under his arm. She likes you, man. Sure, I muttered. She likes me for target practice. Nah, they always do that. A girl starts trying to kill you, you know she's into you. Makes a lot of sense. Beckendorf shrugged. I know these things. You ought to ask her to the fireworks. I couldn't tell if he was serious. Beckendorf was lead counselor of Hephaestus. Lead counselor for Hephaestus. He was this huge dude with a permanent scowl, muscles like a pro ball player, and hands calloused from working in the forges. He just turned 18 and was on his way to NYU in the fall. Since he was older, I usually listen to him about stuff, but the idea of asking Annabeth to the 4th of July fireworks down at the beach, like the biggest dating event of the summer, made my stomach do somersaults. Seriously? She kissed you already, my dude. It's so frustrating.
And it hurts my head because the signs are so obvious that Percy Jackson has to be blind.
He's only that way when it comes to him, because then he said, then Selena Beauregard, the head counselor of Aphrodite, passed by. Beckendorf had a not-so-secret crush on her for 3 years. She had long black hair and big brown eyes, and when she walked, the guys tended to watch. She said, "Good luck, Charlie." Nobody ever calls Beckendorf by his first name. She flashed him a brilliant smile and went on to join Annabeth on the red team. Like, yeah, this is just sort of like silly teen drama of like these kids, they obviously like each other, they don't know how to communicate. Like, that's sort of like the premise. The rest of this stuff that happens with the giant ants and the capture of the flag, it really doesn't matter. B,
this is what you would call in a sitcom. This is kind of getting to a means, or pretty much this is the problem that they have to figure out in the situational comedy.
No, the premise is just structured around getting these characters together.
They have to come to a solution of saving Beckendorf, so Beckendorf can ask Selena to the dance. Well, I guess fireworks at this point, but you know, it's pretty much the exact same thing. It's the exact same.
It's the same thing.
But I'm sure like Kevin Bacon was there too. It's got some Footloose elements.
This feels like a John Hughes movie or something, plus mythology.
Even like Centaur Kevin Bacon would be there. Percy, she's really into you. Thanks, Kevin Bacon Centaur. You get like things like, I think the ants are really scary. There's some good action scenes with it. But I think the highlight is that there's a giant bronze dragon that melts ants, and I love it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, the action stuff is fun enough. I've talked about how, like, action just doesn't really get me. You know what I mean? I don't find it that compelling, especially, like, written on a page. Like, it's one thing if maybe I'm watching a movie, action can sometimes be fun, but I oftentimes really don't care. Especially because the stakes are so low. We literally just finished reading a book where the stakes were really high, the Battle of the Labyrinth, there were all these monsters coming out of the woodwork. Having, you know, a dragon appear to, like, attack some big ants, it feels like such a minor boss battle in the grand scheme of things that I didn't really feel that compelled or interested by it.
But dragons are cool, B, and when it comes...
Dragons are, in fact, cool.
But for me, when it comes to it, I think I finally solved why I don't like fight scenes is because I really enjoy world building more than anything. I think world building is the most fascinating thing an author can do. Action's cool, but then you get to more world building. Like, I'm starting to read The Wheel of Time. Good luck, everybody. See you in like 16 years when I read like 14 giant phone books. But what I enjoy with that is the world building. I think when it comes to it, you can have action, but it's like the ends justify the means. But here, like, I think it's appropriate to have it here because you have things where you have a new piece of technology that the Hephaestus had made, or like I guess the kids of Hephaestus, because we find out that before they had the golden fleece in Thalia's tree, they only had to protect him was a dragon. And this was the dragon, and they brought it back.
Yeah,
and
I guess that world building is interesting, but the actual, like, oh, now we've activated the dragon stuff,
no,
like,
I love how
care.
stupid it is, because it's a sitcom. It's like, oh, we gotta activate it really quickly.
You have to activate it, right? It's so
and then
funny.
it goes haywire, and I love it. And then it, you know, the whole action set piece at the end, the crescendo, is Beckendorf turning it off and getting the girl at the end. And Percy Jackson is a complete putz.
And then he doesn't even ask Annabeth to the fireworks.
She
asks him. Because he's a doofus.
No, B, it's a Disney Channel original movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this felt very Disney Channel.
This is where, like, again, ant stuff can be cool, but I like the interpersonal fighting and the world building, which, at this point, I just want to hit my head through a drywall right now. Like, I'm feeling very Kyle-like right now, of just, like, Percy Jackson and Annabeth should just say it already. Like, it's so obvious to the point of where it's dumb.
Yeah. It's not even, like, from a shipping perspective, like, oh, I really want them to be together, but it's more like they obviously like each other, and, like, the very silly, immature way in which kids will not, like, communicate that kind of thing to each other is hilarious. And I'm just like, just say the thing that is on your brain. Because on the one hand, Annabeth, right, Percy doesn't know people's feelings, but Annabeth knows that about him, so if she wants him to know, then she should just say it. Do you know what I'm saying? So I mean, I kind of give her a shout out in a way at the end of this short story, because she at least
takes the initiative.
Has the nerve to, yeah, exactly. She takes the initiative to say, hey, do you want to go to these freaking fireworks? Because obviously he does. Like, we know, everybody knows.
Yes, and I think because we're looking at this from the adult perspective, we're like, hey, B, you want to go get dinner? Do you want to go on a date? Whereas kids are like, would you like to go to the dance?
Hey, listen, you'd be surprised how many dates I've went on as an adult where I didn't know it was a date because people didn't tell me. So that's annoying.
Well, it is. I've been on plenty of dates like that where it's like that. Like,
no, literally my boyfriend has said multiple times, I'm so glad that you were like, hey, by the way, this is a date, like, clarified to me, because a lot of people don't. Can you imagine the lowest bar ever?
Oh, I've gone on, like, dates, like, e-dates with people.
Yeah, and you just don't know. What does it mean? What does it all mean?
No, it's like when you go to, like, because I used to do online dating, but I don't do it anymore. It's like when you talk to people, so why are you on this website? You know, I'm just...
To meet friends.
To meet friends. No, even though it's like, I just imagine, like, going on
Go on Facebook, then.
B, I'm just imagining, like, you go on something like J-Date, and they ask you, so are you Jewish? I'm here, aren't I?
Yeah, that's kind of confusing, huh?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of For Farmers Only?
Oh, yeah, no, I've seen it For Farmers Only. My favorite one, though, B, is the one for Lonely Lighthouse Keepers. This is the one that exists.
I love that. Lonely Lighthouse Keepers. Oh, man. You see Moxie Mallahan on there. No, you see her dad for sure.
Oh, her dad's
right?
on there. No, he's on Grindr.
Yeah, her dad's on there. Oh, no. Plot twist. And that's how Lemony Snicket ended up being her new dad. Wait a second. Oh, no, the timeline does not work. Lemony Snicket is too young then.
Well, no, obviously later on in life, he rekindled his love with Moxie's dad. And then Mox's dad became a cradle snatcher.
He's really old.
Yes, he's a cradle snatcher.
Okay, this is a horrible story. We need to move on.
Oh, man. This is what happens when you're not doing a Series of Unfortunate Events podcast at the moment.
Yeah, it just leaks into other parts of your podcast. Anyway.
Yes. I've been getting fairly nostalgic, but yeah, the story ends with how you imagine it. And like before, we got some new things. Maybe the dragon might come back in The Last Olympian. That'd be kind of cool if like he destroys Kronos.
Yeah, like literally a Deus Ex Machina thing of just like, here's a robot.
Well, literally, it's a god in the machine.
He doesn't work. No, we've talked about this. Percy Jackson brings Deus Ex Machina to a whole new level because sometimes they literally have gods and machines that appear and help people. And it's like, oh, wow, you went real literal with that, huh?
Yeah, so maybe we might see that dragon again because if the dragon wasn't destroyed, it means it might come back.
Yeah, who knows? We'll see.
They just turned it off. It's getting so cold. Davy. Okay. And then we get to the last story, which I think is the best out of all of them. I like the story a lot. B, what's the summary of the last story?
Well, we get another fun group of people, which is the Big Three's children. We get Percy, Talia, and Nico. And they go to the underworld, which is fun. We haven't been to the underworld in a hot minute. Has it been since The Lightning Thief?
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, we haven't been literally in the underworld since The Lightning Thief, so that's kind of fun. They have to retrieve Hades' sword.
Yes.
Which I guess he doesn't...
We don't know that he doesn't know.
A demigod spy steals it. I wonder who the demigod spy is.
And he had one eye and had anger issues. Well, that only narrows it down to two people.
It's nothing but Ethan Nakamura, the kid who was introduced literally to just be evil. He has an eye patch. Of course he's evil.
Yes, and that's kind of the problem when it comes to it, is that you literally have a character that looks evil, has an eye patch, and his entire lineage is devoted to the god Nemesis.
The funny thing about Ethan Nakamura as a character is sometimes we talk about how like ridiculously villainous Luke is, but to some extent, even though he goes about it in completely the wrong way, and he is bad, he is very bad. Don't get me wrong.
He's cartoony.
He does have... Yes, he's cartoonish and he's kind of mean and cruel and does things that are like well beyond the justifiable reasons for why he does them, basically.
He's like the Snidely Whiplash. Yeah, like Percy Jackson villains. And I read a whole book about this, kind of like why we like villains so much. I think it's called like pointy mustaches and long capes. It might be it's been years since I've read it. But why we like villains so much is because they're proactive, whereas our heroes will always react to their proactivity.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get too much into Luke, but what I was saying is, as much as I like to criticize him, and he is a bad person, he's not a bad character in the sense that as a character, he's interesting and compelling, and he has a backstory, and he has a reason and a motive for doing the things that he does. He gets out of hand with that reason. Yes, exactly. He becomes a genocidal maniac eventually because of it, but he has understandable motives. In fact, those motives are very much in step with how Percy feels. That's what happens in the first book, is he tries to be like, see, don't you understand? These, godly parents, they abandon us, they use us, they don't, claim us when we want to be claimed, like all of that stuff. But the weird thing about Ethan Nakamura is he doesn't ever get the benefit of like having as much of a motivation. You know what I mean? Because he's such like a side character, so he's just sort of one-dimensional, and that's maybe like my main criticism of him.
He works well in like this short story, but the one thing I actually wanted to come back, like screech the brakes on, is that if you think about it, if this book series is written from Luke's perspective, and he was Luke looking at Percy, we would perceive Percy like Luke, almost in the exact same type of way. And that's something that works. But here in the short story, it's goofy, it's lighthearted, because pretty much the whole short story is that Percy Jackson in fan fiction possible bumps into Thalia, and they get transported to Hades, where Nico's there. And they meet Persephone, who tells them that the key of Hades has been stolen, which you use this key to leave the underworld, and that it's been stolen, but also it's being forged into a sword that pretty much anyone who holds a sword can leave the underworld whenever they want. It's like Charlie Bucket and the Golden Ticket.
Yeah, they explain the key of Hades. Nico made a gagging sound. The key of Hades? Wait, Talia said. What are the keys of Hades? Nico looked even paler than his stepmother. Hades has a set of golden keys that can lock or unlock death. At least that's the legend. It's true, Persephone said. How do you lock and unlock death, I asked. The keys have the power to imprison a soul in the underworld, Persephone said, or to release it, Nico swallowed. If one of those keys has been set in the sword, the wielder can raise the dead, Persephone said, or slay any living thing and send its soul to the underworld with a mere touch of the blade. We were all silent. The shadowy fountain gurgled in the corner. Handmaidens floated around us, offering trays of fruit and candy that would help us in the underworld forever. Sorry, that would keep us in the underworld forever.
The thing that I hate about the short story is that I wish this was part of The Last Olympian, because it seems very epic, but also you have the big three working together.
Yeah, it seems like it's a part of the end of the story. Yeah, the stakes feel so much higher than the other two stories, don't they?
Yes, and also you're working with people like the big three. You have Percy, Nico, and Thalia, which all of them are huge characters. Like they're the people that are going to decide the fate of the world. And then they're in this very small short story. And I wish this was part of The Last Olympian, because this would have been a cool little part. Like maybe this might be one of the reasons why Luke is defeated. Maybe, who knows? But it's like one of those things where it's a short story. And I like that Percy and Thalia get to meet again. Thalia is not too excited to see Nico because of Bianca, but they all seem to like reprimand each other, and that's okay. But then you have Ethan Nakamura shows up. He's like, nah, I have the sword.
Yeah. I have tied you to the railroad tracks.
Yes. Yeah.
Or in this case, I have raised another titan.
Yes.
Lapidus,
or I like to call him now my good friend Bob, which I love. I love Bob.
Oh, yeah. So that's the funny thing about this short story, right? Is it starts to feel very epic, like it's part of one of the main books. And then the solution is such a goofy Percy Jackson solution, I can't even get over it.
Well, I like that it's a good setup and payoff. The setup is they already established this where they have to get across a river that isn't the river Styx. It's the river, I always call it the river of forgetfulness. Because if you go into the river, you forget everything. And pretty much if you touch the water, you're going to forget things. So if you fall into it, you'll revert to being like a baby.
Yeah, you forget everything about your identity.
Yes, and Percy Jackson accidentally falls into the water, but luckily because he's a son of Poseidon, he's able to be dry and not be touched by the water, which I think is kind of dumb. I really wish it didn't work like that.
So we totally disagree about this, because I actually kind of like that as a detail, because I kind of wish he used his water powers more. So I like when it ends up being like significant to the plot that he's able to like stay in dry in water, for instance.
But here's the thing, though, is that it's a body of supernatural water. I don't think Poseidon / Percy have dominion over supernatural water in this capacity.
Right. It's different than water. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I guess it does, because that's what it says in the canon, so we have to believe it.
But I still got to applaud that there's this great setup and payoff. Like, this is established later on, something that you don't really think about all that much. Like, oh, it's a Percy Jackson thing because you're in the underworld, so this has to happen. So when the Titan's released, Percy Jackson does the thing that he did earlier in the book, and it works, and it makes the Titan Lord into Bob. And I love that. I think you use the environment to your advantage.
Yeah, so do you want to describe what happens here, or should I?
I'd like to describe it.
Sure.
So what ends up happening is Lapidus falls into the river, and Ethan Nakamura runs away because he's a ding-dong, as I like to say. And he just is like, hello? He said, who am I? You're my friend, I blurted out. You're, Bob.
Bob.
That seems to please him greatly. I'm your friend Bob. Clearly, Ethan could tell things were not going his way. He glanced at the sword of Hades lying in the dirt, but before he could lunge for it, a silver arrow sprouted in the ground at his feet. So pretty much what I like about this is that the villain's foiled. Percy Jackson now is friends with a Titan who thinks his name is Bob and doesn't know anything about him being super duper evil. And I love it.
Yeah, I love, Nico picked up the sword of Hades reverently. We did it. We actually did it. We did, Lapidus asked. Did I help? I managed a weak smile. Yeah, Bob, you did great. So funny.
It's great because, once again, you have a villain turning into a hero, but also it's in a way that actually seems plausible.
I don't know. It's such an interesting tonal shift because it does feel like the stakes are so high and this is like really serious. There's like the big three. They're talking about this like major weapon that Hades has that can like raise the dead or kill someone with one touch, and then the solution is just so goofy. And in some ways it's very Percy Jackson. In other ways I'm like, this is so dumb. Oh my god. Like, really? That's the solution?
I love it. I love the solution, even though again, I have problems with like how the rules of the system works for magic, because that's the thing that I love about when it comes to magic systems. It should always have rules to it, things that you can break and some things that you can't. That's why I like Brandon Sanderson so much. His magic systems are amazing. So when Percy falls into the river, I'm like, does that really work? They never really explained it, but yes, I guess it's going to work. Whereas we know the rules of the river, which is you fall into it, you become a baby pretty much. Not physically, but mentally.
There's something so ridiculous about it, I guess, because the main villain, right, is a Titan also.
An all-powerful, unkillable god.
Yeah, and he exactly. So he feels so unbeatable, like so extreme and powerful when it comes to like defeating him. So then the idea of like, okay, maybe they could lead him to this river and push him in and then say that he's Bob. Like, do you know what I'm saying? There's like a lot of like interesting implications of something like this.
Yes, but you're also playing within the environment and the rules. I think that's important to establish, is the rules are important no matter what you read. It's pretty much like all of a sudden Percy Jackson was floating because gravity is different. They have to explain why is it different, or at least give like a plausible explanation. If not, it doesn't make sense and the readers will stop believing things.
I kind of found it a little bit weird that a Titan would be affected by that river, I guess, because I consider them like as more impervious to like that kind of magic, but that hasn't been established. I guess that's just my own perception.
Well, there are greater magic that even the gods can't possess. Like there's things like Zeus's lightning bolt. It's a power that is unwielded pretty much unless it's Zeus. There's things that you can do, like a good example of this is if you dip into the river Styx, you can become invincible, but you have to have like the Achilles heel. Like there are powers that are so great, but the problem though is there's a cost to them. Like this is a cost that's insane. And I think it's interesting that you have this big villain Bob, who basically, why couldn't they have just thrown Luke into this river? Whoops, he fell up. Now he forgot everything. Now he's not evil anymore. But you wouldn't have things like this. It only works in this situation because they're at the right place at the right time. If not, all hope would have been lost. And yeah, it's a goofy short story, but I do enjoy it a lot. And I like that there's a lot of character building. Good old fashioned Nico is a lot better of a character now. He's in that.
Oh yeah, his character growth has been exemplary, I guess. Or that's not the word I'm looking for. Exemplary?
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, like he's just completely grown from like this kind of superficial silly character to like immediately like emo and like you're not my real friends and blah blah blah, and I don't know, like at the end of which book is it that he was introduced?
Titan's Curse?
The Titan's Curse. At the end of Titan's Curse, when he just starts to go full whingy teen, I'm like, oh no, I was really dreading like this arc of him being that for a long time, but it didn't really last, and now he's a pretty good, interesting character. He has some dark elements to him, obviously, and his backstory is kind of rough, to say the least, because he lost his sister, but it doesn't feel like really heavy-handed. Like he's not just always whining and sad, and he actually, understands that Percy has his best interest at heart, instead of being like, oh, I don't like you because you let my sister die, which just like felt very juvenile.
I think it really works in this chapter, especially with the part where they're seeing all their mothers and how Thalia has a terrible mom. Good old-fashioned Nico doesn't know his mom, and Percy, because his mom's, really got it going on, and she's a really good mom.
Really got it going on. Percy's mom has got it going on.
Yeah. In that's how he's able to defeat the evil, spooky ghost, is because Percy Jackson's mom is so good that she couldn't possibly do anything evil. And there's things like that I really do enjoy, is that, sometimes parents do affect children in different ways than you think they might, but they can. And I really do enjoy all those aspects of them working together, and also Thalia helping Bianca in a sense of like coming to like a reconciliation about her. And also Nico isn't terrible and awful, and Percy loves his friends.
Yeah, I like that they all get along despite like the established. I mean, like when Talia's first introduced, she has the thing against Percy. Not when he's first introduced, but later on, Nico has a thing against Percy, and eventually they kind of resolve their differences and realize that they're stronger together, which is kind of nice.
That's the Goku effect. Every villain becomes Goku's friend by the end.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even call them villains, but they had, they were rivals, I guess, in some way. Even Clarice too. This book is really interesting because a lot of his former not nemesis even. They're just like were people that he didn't get along with. He had something against for some reason, or they had something against him. They've found a way to get along, which is kind of a nice little lesson there, I guess.
It is a very nice little lesson, and I like at the end of this is that, again, it's kind of weird because we still don't know. Like, Nico's like, Percy, did you think about the thing we talked about? I have to think about it. Okay, I'll see you later then. I'll see you in the next book, basically, and just poofs.
Oh, right, yeah, because we skipped over that. That's like, yeah, we didn't really talk about the timeline of this book, which is interesting. So the first story is that fall, the school year. So it's right after the summer of the Battle of the Labyrinth.
Correct.
Then the second story is during the summer of the Battle of the Labyrinth, that summer that kind of gets very quickly glazed over by Percy, where he's like, yeah, and the fireworks happened and other stuff happened and things were different after the battle, but you know, we got through it. Like all that stuff, which is sort of glazed over, is actually then made clear. The timeline is interesting because it goes forward and then backward and then forward again because then it's winter break in the last story.
I think originally it was probably in chronological order, but either the publisher or whatever thought this would work much better in intensity. You sort of have really simple.
Yeah, I think it's intensity because the first one, it seems like less extreme than the second. Well, actually, no, I don't even think that's true because the first story, if it were the story of like the dragon and capture the flag and everything, the stakes are pretty low on that. So I actually think it would have worked just fine as the first one in this. And chronologically, it would have worked. So I don't know why it was moved around. It's kind of confusing.
Well, we're creatures of habit. We like when things are in chronological order. I don't like when things like go around. Like Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the animated TV show is annoying in that way, where each episode is a different part of the war, like different timelines. And it makes me go nuts because you have to watch in a specific order or it makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't exactly know why the timing needs to be like that. Like, it could have easily swapped them. They would have made sense intensity-wise. It would have made sense chronologically. I don't know. Is it just because it's a longer story, maybe?
I feel like this is an editor's decision rather than it just being...
Yeah, probably.
Something...
It's probably an editor's decision.
Yes, and I just find it funny that the last one of this is pretty much like the prelude to The Last Olympian. Like, did you think about my idea? Yeah, I thought about it. I'll have to think about it some more. Cool, we're not going to talk about it whatsoever. I'll see you next week when the book actually starts. Oh, man. Does it hurt my head? So do you have any theories now about what that thing possibly might be or no?
What they talked about? Oh, geez. I can't even begin to tell you. I had a hard time guessing last time because what did they say? It says, he turned to leave, but he looked at me one more time. Percy, you haven't forgotten my offer. A shiver went down my spine. I'm still thinking about it. Nico turned to leave, but he looked at me one more. Oh, sorry, I'm rereading. Nico nodded. Well, whenever you're ready. After he was gone, Talia said, what offer? Something he told me last summer, I said. A possible way to fight Kronos. It's dangerous, and I've had enough danger for one day.
So I will tell you this, B. This is not a spoiler, and that is, there is something in this short story that they do talk about or they bring up that may or may not be it.
I don't know if I want to guess. I mean, it's obviously, I don't think it's the sword because they just found out about that and they had already talked about it before.
And also no one knew about the sword because Persephone made the sword in secret.
Yeah.
But it's something that's super dangerous and that there's no going back once you do it.
Oh. Wait a second. I keep thinking about the River Leith because in some ways, if Percy were to erase his memory, would he then not be able to fulfill the prophecy and therefore he'd be able to keep people safe? Would it be like something like that? I'm wondering.
If we're looking at the hero's journey, one part of it is either redemption, but also there's a part of it which is sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a sacrifice.
Yeah. Or what happens when you throw Luke in there with two brains in it? Which one survives?
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying about the Titan thing. It works on Titans. So, like, would they be able to defeat Kronos that way? I'm trying to think if the River Leaf has anything to do with it or if it's something else.
B, what you're telling me is Percy Jackson should just keep a mason jar of that stuff and, like, throw it on Luke's face, like pepper spray?
Yeah, I don't think it works that way. I think you have to be submerged, but I don't know.
That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say anything else because then I might accidentally give it away.
All right. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but that's my best guess.
It's a pretty good guess. I'll give you that. But overall, what did you think of this book?
Generally speaking, I really liked it, honestly. I had some criticisms about the interview stuff, but also I thought they were fun at the same time. Like, they were silly, but they were fun. There were some silly parts in general that, again, they were entertaining, but I maybe would have gone about it a different way. In general, there was, like, maybe a higher proportion of character stuff in these short stories as opposed to general Percy Jackson books, I guess, because those tend to be padded out with more fight scenes and more, like, I don't know, interruptus, as we've talked about, like, sort of them about to talk about something important, but then it gets interrupted for some reason. I feel like there's more, like, important conversations that happen in this. Like, there's actually, like, people explicitly stating their feelings, which I feel like so often is prevented in some way in other Percy Jackson books. And I don't know if that's just the way that the chapters are structured, but because it's a whole big chunk of a story and there's no, like, way it's broken up the way that chapters are in the other books, then maybe it just gives us a more, like, loose structure for the characters to talk to each other. I don't exactly know, but I kind of like that about it.
I think it's one of those things that if they did bring something up in this book that's super major, and then you have to go back to the original series, how do you reintroduce that for people that may or may not have read this book? That's kind of the hard little, like, it's almost like a scale almost. So it's like, oh, look, this is how we defeat Kronos. We just talk about it in this book, and then they have to reintroduce it again. And that's kind of hard to do. But what I like about this is that it's its fun thing by itself. You can read these short stories and get a lot out of it or get nothing out of it. It doesn't affect the story in many ways. Like, yes, I guess it adds motivation, but very underlined. It might add some more things, maybe in the next book. But what I really do enjoy about it is that it's fun.
Yeah, no, it's not required reading, I would say. But if you want more of these characters, then it's worth it. In some ways, I prefer it to
there's a lot
the way
of character
that some
fulfillment.
of the other books are written. Yeah, exactly. There's, like, a lot of important character growth. We talk about their motivations. You know, we talk about Clarice's biggest fear, Percy's biggest fear. We talk about Percy and Annabeth and how they relate to each other, how, you know, interesting it is that they're simultaneously dealing with all of, like, these heady, like, world affecting things, but also they're teenagers and they're immature and they don't know how to communicate. And, you know, obviously the last story talks a lot about how much power Percy and Talia and Nico have, and that how that weighs on them and all that responsibility. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in these short stories, even if they're not, like, required necessarily for you to get what's going on.
And you know what Uncle Ben says every time he dies now at this point? Great power comes, I'm dying. Oh, by the way,
Here we go again.
Peter, it's great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. I don't know what's worse, that Batman's parents die more than Uncle Ben, because I just saw the Joker and you see them die in it. I guess spoiler alert, and for a Batman story. Like, oh God, how many times do you see people die? But no, it's about great power comes great responsibility, but also when it comes down to it, what I really do enjoy about these is that it's fun. It's okay to have a story that isn't serious. I think that's what I love about this, is that this is a fun bit of short stories. You can read these and just have fun reading. Oh my gosh, that's a weird alien concept, but that's what I really do enjoy about this, is that you can read this and have fun. You don't have to worry about, are characters going to live or die? It's just, I guess it's like almost like you're a fly on the wall just doing miscellaneous Percy Jackson adventures, and I like that, and I really enjoy about that. And I'd say read it if you really, really want more Percy Jackson stuff, but if you just want to keep reading the main series, it doesn't affect you one way, shape, or form, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's kind of the great thing about this book, actually, is it, because it's not required, it has the luxury of talking about, like, more character stuff and less about plot stuff. Like, we don't have to get into the whole stuff with Kronos. We don't have to keep the plot moving forward as much because they're self-contained stories. So we get the chance to, like, delve in deeper to, you know, the motivations maybe of how people are feeling.
I kind of wish there were more little short contained stories in Percy Jackson, like in the main series. I think that would be fun to do. I understand why it doesn't really work, because you have to keep the plot going along. Like, it isn't going to be like a 1,000-page book where you could do stuff like that, but I do enjoy when you have, what Rick Riordan's really good at is writing characters, and actually he's really, really good at writing short stories. Yes, the introduction of things can be a little fan fiction-y, but when you get to the beginning, middle, and end, they all work. They're very concise. They're all in character, and that's really hard to actually write a short story compared to writing a long story, because you have less words to work with and you take things out. you can make a story better with less words than more words. And I think Rick Riordan really does that.
Yeah. I kind of like the structure of the short story for him. I think it works really well. And like I said, I think it necessitates less of that interrupting kind of stuff because there's not as many things going on. You can focus on one story. And there's not like another like character zooming into the thing and being like, wait, no, don't say the thing that's very important, which we've kind of made fun of in the past.
B, that's how he sent his kids to college, was through Interruptus.
Yeah.
Man.
It's true. That's how we
So
can
B,
add
do you
more
want to read
books.
some emails for this week?
The first one is from Lindsay, who says, "Hi, Zack and B. I hope you're having a good weekend. I just wanted to tell you guys how much I enjoy your podcast. I'm currently a college student studying history and media studies, and I absolutely loved reading Percy Jackson as a kid. Listening to your takes on each chapter really brings me back to my childhood in the best way possible. I also really love how the two of you connect Percy Jackson to other books and works of fiction. However, to Zach, I have to say I disagree with your take on the recent Star Wars films. As a massive fan of both the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, your dismissal of The Last Jedi is particularly disheartening to me, as that film changed my life and the way I think about cinema and large franchises. Of course, I have no right, nor does anyone else, to say your opinion regarding new films is wrong or stupid or anything like that, as long as one's opinions do not hurt anyone. Those opinions do not hurt anyone else. It's completely fine. However, if you ever have the time, I would just love to talk to you about The Last Jedi and why you feel so strongly against it, and maybe I could explain to you why I love it so much. I'm excited for your podcast tomorrow, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday." Well, now it's Thursday. But, yeah. Best, Lindsay. I have no opinions about The Last Jedi because I didn't watch it.
So what I'm going to say, I'm going to preface this first, is that it's okay to hate things. It's okay to disagree with things, especially when it comes to movie, because everything is subjective. And you're talking to a person that I love Star Wars. B, how much do I love Star Wars?
You mention it a lot, so probably a lot.
I do. It's one of those where it actually helped me make some wonderful lifelong friends. I waited 12 hours in line for The Force Awakens. You don't think I really, really wanted The Last Jedi to be good? I actually envy you. But the problem with that movie, and it comes to just down to, it's not a good script. It looks pretty, but the problem though is that everything the characters do in that, they're all dumb. And there's like 18 C stories in that, and if I were to like list everything, it'd be very, very, very long. But I guess the main points that I don't like about the movie is that, for me, I idolized Luke Skywalker as a kid. Like, he is a person that loved to hang out with his friends. He wanted to save his friends. He wanted not really to be a good son, but like he fought for a goal and things. Like, when you first see him, he's like, I'm going to take on the whole empire myself. And then throughout the story, he becomes, a Jedi. But in this, I just don't like how they have Luke, because he's a mean, bitter old man who, that is cool that he gave up the Force and stuff because of a mistake. But the problem, though, was I don't believe he's a person that would give up on his friends. Empire Strikes Back, he literally left his training with Yoda to help his friends. And in Return of the Jedi, he leaves his friends because he doesn't want to endanger them. So you're telling me he doesn't want to come face to face and face his mistake of the dipshit Kylo Ren? Oh man, like, I guess, yes, he's an astral projection, but to complete the hero's journey, you need to have like that reconciliation and all that stuff. And the preface this is, I actually did go back and rewatch the movie, and it's a movie that I want to really like. But the problem though is how they have the characters and all the humor and a lot of the plot stuff. It's not a movie that was made for me. It was made for people that aren't me. And the problem with it is that I don't hate Rian Johnson. Some of my favorite parts of that movie is when Leia like is in space, and there's some dumb stuff in that movie. What makes the prequels fun is the level of incompetency, whereas this movie just feels like a bunch of people in a committee just started putting check marks. Like, there's things that I liked about it, like with Rey pretty much being nobody. Like, I say that line almost constantly to my friend. You're nobody. Your parents were filthy drunk traders. They sold you off for drinking money. I just like how he says that. I say that to all my friends. And it's a hard movie to talk about because the problem was that it stems from almost this weird thing now where we have to pit people against things where, like, it's pretty much the same conflict, but also you have this thing now where there's always going to be a split now. If you don't like a movie, you're the enemy. Like, the same as with, like, Ghostbusters 2016, and even the Joker movie. The problem with it is that it's okay to hate movies. It's okay to disagree with movies, but it's one of those where this movie just, it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me because as a person that loves Star Wars in a way that isn't like, I would never gatekeep anyone, but it's one of those where for me, it's a movie that I would probably skip because it's not fun. And you know what's going to happen in the next one, The Rise of Skywalker, is going to fix everything. Ray's probably going to be something like, your parents were nobody, but your grandparents were. Something dumb. Something like, I'm gonna keep ranting, so I'm gonna have to stop myself, but I respect your opinion. I would never say that movie's bad. For you, for me, I envy you. I don't know why I don't like that movie.
You just don't like it, I guess. Yeah, that's like the weird thing about movies, because when it comes down to it, if you like it, then you like it. It's hard to like argue something that subjective. Like it's personal preference, I guess. I haven't seen most of the recent Star Wars movies, so I don't have any opinion or stake for that matter in any of the movies, because I'm like not in the fandom or whatever. So I'm just sort of like, are you winning, son?
So here's the thing. I'm not in the fandom either. Like, I watch Star Wars, I talk about Star Wars, but I don't interact with a lot of Star Wars fans.
I think you're in the fandom in the sense that you're like invested in the story. Do you know what I mean? There's like a certain sense of like, you know about the extended universe to some extent. You like have watched all of the movies. You have opinions about it. I don't have like an opinion. I know it exists. I've seen some of the movies. I wouldn't consider myself like a part of the fandom, you know?
Yes, and I would never say that when it comes to it, the movie's bad in your eyes, because I will never tell you why it's bad. I can only give you my opinion, and I'm just some guy in a microphone. I might be right. I might be totally wrong. When it comes to Rogue One, that's a trash movie. Like, The Last Jedi is a masterpiece compared to that movie, and also Han Solo, or Solo, A Star Wars Story, because they had a vision, and then they both fired the directors. Gareth Edwards was fired from that project. That's why the first trailer looks so different from the other ones, because they had fired him. They got rid of the original two directors for Solo, and that movie has like a massive like direction. This movie does feel like a person's vision. For me, it doesn't work, but you know what? We're going to be talking about this for way too long. If you like it, it's changed your life, I'm so happy for you. That is the best thing you could possibly have for a movie, because there's a lot of movies that I hate that people love, and then in their top 5 movies. And everything at the end of the day is subjective. But thank you so much for that lovely email. I actually did rewatch it, and it helped me get ready and motivated for The Rise of Skywalker, which the toy aisle for that is so disappointing. I'm so sad because I want to buy a bunch of stuff, but there's a lightsaber that goes meow. That's something that happens. So we got one from Gideon. Oh no, is this Gideon from Gravity Falls? Oh, hi there, neighbor.
Yeah. Oh wow, that was a good one. I didn't know that you could do a Gideon. That struck me all of a sudden. You would sound exactly like Seuss and Gideon of all the characters. That's so weird.
Oh, hey dudes. I can do a Seuss really well, because I can do like a...
No, you could embody Seuss. You are Seuss.
I am Seuss, dudes. I actually almost want to read this as Seuss.
That would be such an easy Halloween costume for you. Like, you literally would just need a t-shirt and a hat.
Well, yeah, because Seuss is short for Jesus, and well, the problem though is I go from my Pedro to my Seuss, which is just Pedro but fatter. So yeah.
Wait, who's Pedro?
Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, you're right. They're very similar in some ways.
They're very similar, yeah. So I'm going to read this.
Pedro has more of an accent, I think.
Hey, y'all, it's Gideon again. I'm trying not to do Gideon
Don't read
right
in
now.
the Gideon voice the whole time.
No, it says y'all. I'm still loving the series, and I hope you like the drawing of Ethan Nakamura, however that's spelled. Actually, you spelled it right. I don't know how to draw a realistic mouse, but I'm sorry for the bad lighting. I took this with a picture in my history class. Have a nice day and keep staying mortal.
Wait, you took the picture in history class?
He took the picture in history class.
That's maybe don't do that. Maybe wait until after class to send us emails.
I think that's like a great compliment, because I don't remember taking pictures in history class. I remember our teacher purposely made us put our phones on the wall, like had like this little like thing, so we couldn't get our phones, which is the greatest advice ever made. I love it. But here's the picture of Ethan Nakamura. Do you like it, B? I like it. It sums up Ethan.
It's a very minimalist approach to Ethan, but yeah.
I mean, he's a very minimalist character.
Yeah. We've got the eye patch. That's really kind of all you need. He needs a bit more of a a sinister look. I feel like he looks too happy.
Well, this is before he became evil.
It was before. No, but he became evil pretty shortly after the eye patch, I think.
Well, B, this is like when he realized that he could be evil. I'm going to be evil today.
He's like, haha, I'll be evil. Yeah, he looks real stoked about being evil.
Well, some people do. They have cookies on the dark side. Some people know. But B, do you want to read some iTunes reviews?
So yeah, both 5-star reviews. One from Mumble the Cat, who says, 5 stars, you guys rock. Short and simple, very nice. Thank you, Mumble the Cat. And the other one.
Well, hopefully we don't roll.
I mean, we could do both. It's the world is our oyster. We could rock and we could roll. And the other one is from Yes, I Love It, Hard Eyes, who says,
B, I was wholeheartedly expecting you to go, yes.
Yes. No, but it's yes, it's with an E, not an A. I haven't listened yet. Yeah, I haven't listened yet, so I'm not caught up, and I'm just going to give it 5 stars. So wait, you've never listened to our podcast at all? Or you are just not caught up? I don't know, but either way, thank you.
So B, this is what we'd call in the industry a biased, because we talk about Percy Jackson. I mean, thank you so much for the 5-star review. We always really appreciate 5-star reviews. Maybe listen to the show possibly before you review it. That's just my advice.
Yeah, I'm glad you're listening. That it's going to be really funny when you finally get to this episode and we read your review.
Yes, and it's a great review, but also you're going to hear me rant about Star Wars and talk about this amazing book, and I get to hang out with my beautiful friend B. Ooh, because we're in the October season.
Spooky, yeah. Yeah, Zach Spookle.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Or Zach Spookle.
Well, isn't it Bryce Skeleton? Ooh.
Yes, Bryce Skeleton. Bryce Skeleton.
B, can you believe the next recording we're going to do this face to face again?
Yeah, that's true. You're going to be here in less than a week.
Yes, and I have to take a red eye because they changed my flight, so I get there at 10 a.m. now, and I leave at 8 p.m.
10 a.m. It's going to be great. We're going to wake up nice and early. I promise to bring coffee.
Yes. B asked me what flavor, and I just said coffee flavored, please.
Yeah, I think you don't take any like cream or anything, right? It's just black coffee.
I'll take my coffee like
energy.
I like my men, depressed and hot. But I'm so excited for next week. We have so many wonderful plans. We have so many plans we actually finalized. You'll be able to hear them here on Radio Camp Half-Blood. Same Half-Blood time, same Half-Blood channel. Doo!
Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't believe you're already coming here, and we're having the meetup soon. So soon.
It's going to be so crazy to meet up with you and meet up with our amazing fans, just because it's always fun to hang out in New York, and also spooky time. Woo! It's almost becoming a yearly tradition at this point.
Yeah, it's so funny. You always come here in October when my house is Halloweenified. I feel like that's your entire perception of my house. But well, anyway, I should probably give you the details of the meetup, which is very soon now, you guys. It's in 8 days. It's 8 days from the time we're recording this.
So if you haven't finalized it, you should do it.
Yeah, if you're on the fence about going, please
pull the trigger.
Come. Yeah, you just have to show up. There's really no requirements. If you want to wear like a, Camp Half-Blood shirt, that would be cool. If you want to dress up as a character, also totally awesome. If you don't want to do those things, also great. I'll probably have some pins to give you. Me and Zach are going to be hanging out, giving people high fives, just standing there talking mostly. It's really very low key. Anyway, so the details of that are, it is on October 18th. That's a Friday. It begins at 3:30 p.m. and ends at 5:30. You can come anytime you want, and it is at the William Tecumseh Sherman Monument, right near the entrance, one of the entrances to Central Park. So it's like right on the edge of Central Park. Just type it in to your Google Maps or whatever, and it'll come up. And it's kind of hard to miss, and we'll be standing there being our dorky selves talking about books, probably.
Yes, we're going to be talking about books. Maybe I might get a picture with Balto, the statue, about how you should vaccinate your kids.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited for this. It's going to be a really great meetup, and we're going to see a really, really great show. We're going to be seeing The Lightning Thief. Just a show that I've been waiting for so long. We can finally get to talk about it.
My second time seeing The Lightning Thief. I'm interested to see if it's different at all.
Well, this is the original cast, so they're going to give it their super all.
Yeah, it's the original cast, so it's going to be a little bit... It's going to be pretty similar probably, but I imagine maybe the production quality might be a bit better.
When you have different cast and crew, they give you sometimes things just flow differently. Not to say that the traveling tour wasn't, good or bad, but every
yeah. I mean, I also saw it in New York, so there's going to be a lot of like similarities. But we'll see. Yes. We'll see how different it is.
But we're going to see it in the greatest city in the world. So, B, where can they find you on social media for all your beautiful news?
You can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com, and you can find me on Twitter at bkellygorman. Right now, as we mentioned, I have my spooky username, so I'm listed as Bryce Skeleton.
If you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Suda41. That's SUDA41. My name currently is Zack Attack Sokol, because I'm cool. If you want to tweet at the show, that's at halfblood_radio. If you want to email the show, you can email us at radiocamphhalfblood@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/radiocamphhalfblood. We're going to be having a lot of bonus episodes coming early in there, so if you haven't possibly donated, you'll be getting some cool backer stuff very, very soon. We have the meetup, got t-shirts at TeePublic, so just type in www.tpublic/radiocamphhalfblood, and maybe you might be able to get some cool merch. Well, B, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And let's keep staying spooky. No, let's keep staying mortal, guys. Yeah, mortal. Ooh, we're getting in the Halloween spirit.
I guess.
Ooh.
Okay, it's time to go now.